When I pulled back into Millstone on Christmas Eve, the whole town looked like something out of snow globe. Fresh powder blanketed the cracked sidewalks, the diner windows glowed amber, and the church bells were chiming out Silent Night. But I felt no peace, just a hollow ache where family used to live. My house sat right where I left it, slouched on the corner of Gravel Road and Apple Tree Lane, tucked behind the pine trees I planted with Dean when he was 8. He said they'd grow taller than the house one day. He was right. They had. The porch creaked as I stepped onto it, my breath rising in little clouds. I unlocked the door, walked into the cold silence of my home. Everything smelled like cedar and dust. I left the lights off. Sometimes darkness is easier. I put the sugar cookie tin down on the kitchen counter, untouched, unopened, and sat in my old recliner. The leather cracked. My back ached. The wind moaned outside like a widow. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the photo of Helen. In it, she was holding Dean at age 5. Her smile was warm, soft eyes crinkled at the corners. "You'd have known what to say," I whispered. I just drove 1,200 miles for a door that didn't open. The wind howled again, but this time it wasn't the wind. It was a knock, not loud, just hesitant. I sat up. Another knock. I opened the door, and there she was, May. She stood on my porch in a wool coat 3 sizes too big and a scarf that looked handmade. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her eyes, though soft, clear, and familiar, stared right into mine. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Hale," she said. "May." I blinked. "What are you doing out here? You should be with family." She held up a brown paper bag and smiled gently. "Brought you a Christmas dinner. Turkey, mashed potatoes, extra gravy. Figured maybe you could use a warm plate." I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked into the house like she'd been there before. She hadn't, but it felt like she belonged. I poured 2 mugs of instant coffee, and we sat at the table. She unwrapped the bag, steam rising from tin foil like a miracle. "You drove all this way for Christmas with your son," she said. "Did it go okay?" I didn't answer right away. I took a bite of mashed potatoes, chewed slowly, swallowed. Then I shook my head. "No, it didn't." She didn't ask more, didn't prod, just nodded and said softly, "I'm sorry." For a long time, we sat in silence, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled. Then she looked around and said, "You know, this house has good bones." I chuckled. "It's falling apart." "No," she said, tilting her head. "It's just waiting for someone to care about it again." Her words hit deeper than I expected, like she wasn't just talking about the house. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace I hadn't lit in years. I watched her curl up in Helen's old quilt like she belonged in it. She talked about growing up in Millstone. Her mom died young. Dad ran off when she was 16. She raised herself, put herself through nursing school working at the truck stop diner, raised her son, Noah, with nothing but grit and prayers. Now she worked the night shift at Millstone Nursing, and Noah was off in basic training in San Diego. "That boy never stops surprising me," she said with pride in her voice. "You know what he told me the night before he left?" "What?" He said, "Mom, don't worry about me. Worry about the man who brings you pie when you're old and tired." She laughed, then looked at me with a smile that was almost shy. "Guess I'm still waiting for that pie." It was quiet again. The fire crackled. My heart felt lighter, not because Dean had changed, but because maybe I didn't need him to anymore. May stood to leave just past midnight. I walked her out. Snow had started falling again, soft and slow, covering the old footprints. She turned to me at the gate. "You ever think about hosting something here again?" she asked. "A Christmas dinner, a wood carving class, maybe a potluck?" I shrugged. "Used to. Not anymore." "Well," she said, pulling on her gloves, "maybe it's time to think again." She smiled. Then she left. I stood there in the cold until the snow covered my boots. Then I looked at my house, not as a tomb, but as a blank canvas. Maybe it didn't matter if the kids ever came back. Maybe it didn't matter if the door stayed closed. Because maybe, just maybe, it was time to open new doors. My name is Martin Hale, and I'm 62 years old. Most folks know me around Millstone, Montana, as the guy who fixes anything that runs on gas and prayer. For 40 years, I ran Hale's auto and small engine repair. I built it from scratch, raised 3 kids on the grease under my fingernails and my wife Helen's meatloaf. But Helen passed 5 years ago. Cancer. Quiet but cruel. After that, I didn't have much left except my kids. Especially Dean, my youngest. My boy. My pride. Dean lives in Asheville, North Carolina now. Big tech job. Fancy house. 2 little ones I haven't seen in 3 Christmases. I never complained. I understood. Life gets busy. Flights get expensive. But this year, Dean said something that lit a fire in me. He called just after Thanksgiving and said, "It'd be nice to have you here this Christmas, Dad. The boys should see their grandpa at least once." That was all I needed. I packed the truck with flannel shirts, Helen's old sugar cookie tin, and a wrap box of carved toys I'd made in my shed. I wasn't going to fly. I didn't trust the airlines, and besides, driving gave me time to think. I've always liked the road. 1,200 miles of snow-covered highways. 3 nights in rundown motels. I stopped in Missouri to see an old war buddy. Filled the thermos in Tennessee. Slept with a photo of Helen on the dash. Through whiteouts and black ice, I kept going. Because Christmas with my son, that was worth the trip. I arrived on December 23rd, just past midnight. The neighborhood was lit up like a Hallmark movie. Inflatable snowmen, candy cane lights, plastic reindeer. I spotted Dean's house at the end of the cul-de-sac. 2 stories, brick, porch swing, wreath on the door. I parked across the street, turned off the engine, took a deep breath, and then I saw it. Through the window, a party. People laughing, children running, Christmas music playing low. Dean stood in the kitchen, arm around his wife, Marla, holding a wine glass. They were celebrating. Without me, I waited a few minutes. Maybe they didn't know I was there. Maybe this was a surprise party, and I'd walk in and they'd all cheer Dad like in the movies. So I grabbed the gifts, the cookies, walked through the falling snow, knocked on the door. 1 knock, 2, 3. No one came. I pressed the doorbell, heard a chime inside. Still nothing. Then I heard the laughter stop. Footsteps. Curtains shifted in the upstairs window. A silhouette. Dean. Our eyes met for half a second. And then the light went off. He turned away, and the door never opened. I stood there, freezing, clutching my dead wife's cookie tin and a box of wooden toys shaped like trains and tractors and tiny eagles. I stayed there for a full minute, heart pounding like it did in combat, except this time I wasn't fighting an enemy. I was losing to my own blood. I turned back to the truck, hands numb, face burning. The box slid off my arm into the snow. I didn't bother picking it up. I drove to a rest stop 20 miles outside Asheville and parked behind a salt truck. Slept in the cab with my coat pulled tight. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling, the silence louder than any windstorm I'd driven through. In the morning, I made one call to May, the waitress back in Millstone who always called me handsome as a joke. I told her I'd be home late, and that's when it hit me. Not the cold, not the rejection, but the clarity. I had spent 62 years giving. Time, money, wisdom, apologies I didn't know, gifts I couldn't afford. And what had it brought me? A locked door, a dark window, a son who couldn't be bothered to say, "Come in." But what if this wasn't the end? What if this was the beginning? What if the man they thought they left behind in a broken house in Montana was about to rebuild everything without them? New Year's Day arrived with a bitter chill, the kind that made the wood in my porch steps groan and the windows weep with frost. I woke up early, brewed strong coffee, and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the blank yard. Snow lay untouched, quiet. It felt like a mirror. I hadn't spoken to Dean since Christmas Eve. Didn't plan to. Instead, I found myself dragging out folding chairs from the shed, dusting off Helen's old crock pot, and writing a sign with a blue marker I found in a drawer. New Year's meal, free to all. 12 p.m. Good food, good company. At the Hale House on Apple Tree Lane. I nailed it to the telephone pole near the gas station. Didn't post anything online. Didn't call the papers. Just left it there like a prayer. By 11 a.m., I was halfway through cooking Helen's turkey chili recipe, burned the first batch, cursed like a sailor, then started again with more care. The kitchen smelled like cumin and tomatoes and melted memories. At 11:58, the front porch was still empty. I looked at the table I'd set. Mismatched plates, mason jars for cups, a centerpiece made from pine cones and leftover tinsel. It was quiet again, too quiet, until a knock came at the door. I opened it. "May, carrying a tray of deviled eggs and a smile that could melt frost. "Didn't think I'd let you throw a party without me, did you?" she said. Before I could answer, two more people came up the steps. Mr. and Mrs. Ellison, the elderly couple who ran the antique store downtown. They brought cornbread and a stack of cloth napkins. Then came Rosie, the young single mom with twin toddlers from the trailer park. She had boxed mac and cheese and tears in her eyes. One by one they came. By 12:30, my house was full. Laughter echoed in corners that hadn't heard it in years. Children ran down the hallway. Someone strung lights around the fireplace. A teenager from the community college played quiet guitar on the porch. It felt like Helen was there, not in body, but in spirit. I caught myself smiling. Not a fake, I'm trying to pretend smile. A real one. May floated between rooms, warming plates and warming hearts. At one point, she leaned over and whispered, "Look at you, Mr. Hale, king of the castle again." I chuckled, shaking my head. "This castle's got a cracked roof and a sticky front door." "Yeah," she said, "but it's full of people who showed up. That counts for something." As the sun dipped behind the hills and golden light poured through the windows, I stepped outside to clear my head. That's when I saw him, standing at the gate, hands in his coat pockets. Dean. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had finally grown larger in his absence. He walked up slowly, eyes heavy. "I saw the sign," he said. "I didn't put up for you." "I know." Silence stretched. Then he looked past me at the full house, the music, the laughter, the strangers who didn't feel like strangers anymore. "You really did it," he said. I shrugged. "Guess I didn't need permission after all." He nodded, then said, softly, "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. Not right away, because this wasn't the movies. Forgiveness doesn't happen in one tearful hug. So I looked him in the eyes and said, "You can come in, but you're going to have to bring something to the table. Not food, not wine, respect, and truth." He looked like a man who'd just been handed a heavy load. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He stepped inside, awkward at first, then more at ease as people welcomed him in without knowing the story. May handed him a plate. I sat back down at the head of the table, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a forgotten man. I felt like a man who finally remembered himself. The next morning, I found Dean sitting on the back porch, wrapped in one of Helen's old quilts, coffee steaming in his hands. He looked out toward the pines, where snow was melting off the needles in slow, silver drops. The same pines we planted when he was a boy, back when he'd follow me around with a little plastic hammer, swearing he'd be just like Dad. A lifetime ago. "Sleep okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Better than I deserve." I sat next to him on the wooden step. My knees groaned. The silence between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Dad." Just like that. No build-up, no defense, no excuses. I let it hang in the air for a second. "You're sorry for Christmas Eve?" I asked, looking at him. "For all of it," he said. "I should have opened the door. I should have called more. I should have." He shook his head. "You always showed up. Every damn time. And I didn't." He took a folded envelope from his coat pocket. "I found this last month, tucked in one of Mom's cookbooks." He handed it to me. I stared at it. My name on the front, in Helen's handwriting. I hadn't seen her penmanship in 5 years. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Dear Martin, if you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to say it in person. I know I've always told you how proud I am of you, of the business, of the family, but I never told you the one thing I should have said more often. Thank you. Thank you for raising our kids with grace and strength. Thank you for being soft when I was hard, and hard when I was too soft. They don't know now, but one day they will. One day, when they're lost, they'll look for a lighthouse, and they'll find you. Don't let go of your light, Marty. Not even when they turn away. It'll guide them home. Love, always. Helen." My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. Dean looked down at his boots. "I guess I was lost," he whispered. I folded the letter back slowly. "You still might be," I said, "but you came to the right place." That afternoon, he helped me clear the yard. We laughed once, genuinely, when he slipped and fell into a snowbank. May dropped by with leftover chili, and he thanked her, even offered to wash the dishes. But what surprised me the most was that night when I heard the guitar. He sat on the porch, strumming softly. "Didn't know you played," I said. I didn't, not until Mom passed. It helped. I leaned on the doorway. He played a slow, aching version of Homeward Bound, and I knew something inside him was shifting. But the past isn't done with you just because you're done with it. 2 days later, while sorting through old mail in the hallway cabinet, I found the check. It was unopened, dated 6 months ago, from Dean's company, made out to me, $85,000. Memo line, partial repayment for Dad's investment. I stared at it. Then I checked the return address. It wasn't Dean's. It was from Marla, his wife. And attached was a post-it note. Martin, Dean didn't want you to know. Said it would make things messy. But I think you deserve to know where your money went. I'm sorry. Marla. I felt my hands clench. The cold came back, harder than any snowstorm. See, when Dean wanted to start his own company, I gave him $100,000 from the emergency fund, Helen, and I saved for retirement. Told him it was a loan, not a gift. A loan. He promised to pay it back with interest, said he'd name part of the business after me. Years went by, nothing, and now he tried to repay it quietly behind my back because he didn't want to face me. I walked out to the porch. He was sanding the old birdhouse we built when he was 10. Tell me the truth, Dean, I said. He looked up cautious. Did you take my money, build your life with it, and then try to sneak a check behind my back? He swallowed. I didn't want it to change things. Change what? I asked, my voice rising. The fact that you turned your back on me? That I drove through blizzards just to be ignored like a beggar on your porch? He stood, guilt in every wrinkle of his face. I wasn't trying to hide. I was trying to fix it. Quietly, I stared at him for a long beat. And then I said something I didn't know I'd been carrying. You don't get to fix things quietly. Not when the hurt was loud. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll do better. You'll start by showing up, I said. Not with checks. Not with charity. With time. With honesty. He reached out to shake my hand. I didn't take it. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Forgiveness is a slow thaw. But the snow was starting to melt. 3 days after the check incident, Dean pulled into my driveway in a silver SUV, the kind with heated seats and kid snack crumbs wedged into every corner. I was in the shed fixing the busted latch on May's Snowblower when I heard the car door slam. And then I heard it. Grandpa, 2 voices, high-pitched, full of joy. I turned around, and there they were, Ben, age 7, and Ellie, 5, wrapped up in puffy coats and giant scarves, running through the snow like I was Santa himself. I didn't even have time to brace myself. They tackled me with hugs, so warm I nearly melted on the spot. Dean stood behind them, looking nervous but hopeful. Thought it was time they met the man who made wooden trains by hand. Inside, the kids tore through my living room like explorers on a mission. Ben found my old tin of marbles and asked 50 questions. Ellie kept trying to feed crackers to a stuffed bear that used to belong to Dean. Dean helped me make hot cocoa, the good kind, with whole milk and a dash of cinnamon, just like Helen used to make. He didn't say much, but he moved quieter now, more careful, like a man who had broken something valuable and didn't want to make it worse. Later that evening, as the kids drew on scrap paper at the dining table, Dean handed me a small envelope. From Marla, he said. I opened it. Inside was a Christmas card, late and signed. Just 3 words written in pencil. He needs you. I looked at him. He met my eyes, and I saw the truth of it. For all his success, he was tired, burned out, disconnected, and afraid of how far he'd drifted from who he used to be. After the kids went to bed in the spare room, Dean and I sat on the porch with 2 mugs of tea and a blanket Helen had crocheted. He finally spoke. You know the night you came to the house? I saw you from upstairs. I know, I said. I told Marla it wasn't a good time. Said it'd be awkward with her folks there. But the truth is, I froze. I was ashamed. I didn't say anything. He continued. I thought about calling you for days. But shame's like a dog. Once you feed it, it never stops barking. I looked at him. No one's asking you to be perfect, I said. But showing up? That's how you train the dog. He laughed softly, still teaching me things. Always will. That's my job. The next morning, while the kids were outside trying to build a snowman with dry powder, May came by. Her face looked different. Tight. Pale. Can we talk? She asked. We stepped out onto the porch. The cold bit hard. She reached in her coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Got this yesterday, she said. Didn't want to ruin the visit. I took it. Read the return address. It was from St. Francis Medical in Billings. She took a shaky breath. I went in for a checkup last week. Thought it was just some stress, fatigue, but they found something in my breast. I froze. They don't know yet if it's malignant, she said, voice barely above a whisper. But they want a biopsy. Silence. The kind that isn't empty. It's just overwhelming. I nodded slowly, pressing the envelope to my chest. Whatever happens, I said, you're not alone. She looked at me with watery eyes. I wasn't planning to tell anyone. I've always been strong on my own. I reached for her hand. You've got someone now. Back inside, Dean was reading to the kids. The house smelled like cinnamon and firewood. May sat down beside Ellie and asked if she could color too. And I stood there in the doorway, realizing that the world I thought was gone was slowly rebuilding itself. Different, not perfect, but real. That night, after everyone was asleep, I stepped into the shed and pulled down the old cedar box marked "Do Not Open." Inside were pictures, journals, Helen's recipes, a small velvet pouch with our wedding rings. I pulled out a note she'd once scribbled on the back of a recipe card. Love grows when you give it a place to land. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and started writing. To May, to Dean, to the kids, to the man I used to be. This house is yours. My heart is open. Let's begin again. The drive to St. Francis Medical Center in Billings took 2 hours, but felt like 20. The roads were dry for once, but the air inside the truck was heavy, thick with everything we weren't saying. May stared out the window most of the way. Her scarf was tied a little tighter than usual. She hadn't touched her tea. Do you want music? I asked softly. She shook her head. I want the quiet to mean something. So we drove in silence. Two people who'd lived too long with their hearts in shadows. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and winter coats. Cold, even inside. I sat beside her in the waiting area while nurses moved around us like ghosts. She filled out forms with calm hands. I try not to wring mine. After a while, she turned to me. If it's bad, she said, promise me you won't let this be the end of what you started. I frowned. What do you mean? All these people you're opening your heart to again. Your grandkids, your son, the community. You're finally living again, Martin. Don't shut the door because you're scared to hurt. I'm not scared, I said quietly. I'm just not ready to lose someone else. Her face softened. She placed her hand on mine. Love's always a risk, but so is loneliness. And you've had enough of that. The nurse called her name. She gave my hand one final squeeze before walking toward the exam room. And then I was alone. Just me, the hum of the vending machine, and a stack of outdated magazines. I sat there for almost an hour, watching snowflakes tap against the window like they wanted in. I thought about the last time I waited like this. Helen's final scans. How I had memorized the sound of the clock above the receptionist's desk that day. Tick, tick, tick. Every second felt like it was judging me for not doing more. The nurse came back. Mr. Hale. I stood. She's done. The doctor will call in a few days with results. She's just getting changed. Relief and dread mixed like oil and water. May came out looking pale but composed. You hungry? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. I could eat a plate of greasy fries and a milkshake the size of a paint can. We found a diner on the edge of town. Vinyl booths, a jukebox, and waitresses who called you Han without meaning it. I watched her eat, watched color slowly return to her face. You know, she said between bites, you've changed. How so? Last year, you wouldn't have left your house for Christmas. Now look at you, driving people to hospitals, feeding the town, holding babies. I smiled. Maybe I got tired of waiting for someone to save me. Back in Millstone that night, Dean was waiting on my porch. The kids were asleep in the car. He looked nervous. What's wrong? I asked. He rubbed his hands together. I gave my notice. I blinked. At the company? He nodded. I'm leaving the firm. We've made enough. I've missed too many moments. I want to bring my family here. Start over. I stared at him. My son, the man who once couldn't open a door for me, now ready to tear his whole life down just to build a better one. I don't know if I'm ready to have you under my roof, I said honestly. He nodded. I figured. But I do have an idea, I added slowly. There's that old yellow house down the lane, the one that used to be the church rectory. He lit up. It's for sale. It was. The bank's had a while. Needs work, but you've got 2 hands at time now. He smiled wider than I'd seen in years. I'll get the papers started. As Dean pulled away, I stood there under the stars. Snow fell soft again, and for the first time in decades, I felt something in my bones I didn't recognize at first. Peace. Later, May and I sat together in the living room. The fire crackled. The kids' crayon drawings were still scattered on the table. Even if it's cancer, she said quietly, I'm not scared anymore. I looked at her. You don't have to be. You got people now. You've got me. She smiled, tears in her eyes. I think I finally believed that. The morning the results came in, the sky was clear. That sharp, piercing kind of blue you only get after a long Montana snow, like the heavens have scrubbed themselves clean. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through junk mail, when May's name flashed on my phone. I hesitated. For 3 days, we'd been pretending everything was normal. I took the grandkids sledding down Ridge Hill. May brought over soup and tried to laugh like nothing had changed. Dean hammered drywall in that yellow house like it was his only salvation. But under every smile, every shared meal, was that terrible silence. What if it's cancer? I picked up on the second ring. Her voice was quiet. Can you come over? My stomach dropped. I'll be there in 5. Her living room smelled like lavender and lemon polish. She'd clearly been cleaning. That was May. When emotions got too big, she scrubbed. The envelope sat on her coffee table like a loaded gun. She didn't open it. She waited for me. I sat beside her on the sofa, our knees touching. She looked at me, then at the envelope. Then she opened it. The first line hit like a sledgehammer. Findings suggest presence of invasive ductal carcinoma. Further imaging and consultation required immediately. She read it twice, then folded the letter neatly. I thought I'd feel something, she whispered. What do you feel? Cold. Mostly cold. I took her hand. I'm here. She looked at me, eyes trembling. I don't want to die. You're not going to, I said gently. You're going to fight, and I'll be right here. Tears rolled down her cheeks. You say that like it's easy. It's not, but it's true. The days that followed were a blur of appointments, scans, and second opinions. I drove her to everyone. Sometimes Dean came too, sometimes not. He was busy trying to turn the old rectory into a home. The house was built in 1937. Yellow paint peeled like sunburned skin. The porch was sinking, but the bones were good, real good. I figure I'll start with the kids' rooms, Dean said one morning, while Ellie napped on a pile of insulation. Ben wants a rocket ship ceiling. I nodded, holding the flashlight for him. He was kneeling on the living room floor, prying up warp planks. Looks like we got water damage, he muttered. He wedged the pry bar under one board and pulled. That's when we saw it. An envelope, tucked under the floorboards. Wrapped in wax paper, yellowed with time. Dean looked at me. You think it's... I picked it up. On the front, written in that unmistakable slanted script. To Martin, if I never get the chance to say it. Helen. My heart froze. Hands shaking, I opened it. It wasn't just a letter. It was a confession. Martin, if you found this, it means I couldn't face you with the truth. I've written this letter 100 times and burned it 100 more. But here's the one I couldn't destroy. It's about the summer of '91, when you want to take care of your mother in Nevada for 3 weeks. I told you everything was fine. I lied. I was lonely, and I was weak. And I made a mistake. One that's haunted me for 30 years. Dean may not be yours. I never did the test. I never wanted to know for sure. But you raised him. You loved him. You were his father in every way that mattered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And please don't let this destroy you. Love always. Helen. I sat down hard on the dusty floorboards. Dean crouched beside me, stunned silent. He began, then stopped. I don't care what a test says, I said, voice low and thick. You're my son. He blinked at me, his eyes flooding. I don't even remember a time before you, Dad. That's because I was always there. We sat like that for a long time, the letter between us like a ghost. Eventually, Dean said, Do you want to do a test? I shook my head. No, I want to move forward. And then I added, But you have to tell Marla. His shoulders slumped. She won't take it well. I looked him in the eyes. She deserves the truth. That night, after May's appointment, I showed her the letter. She read it in silence, then said something that surprised me. Helen was brave. I raised an eyebrow. You think so? She made a mistake, but she carried it her whole life. Loved through it, never ran. I nodded slowly. Do you think she was right to hide it? May's answer came soft but firm. I think she was right to tell you, even if she couldn't do it face to face. That night, I walked home alone. Snow began to fall again, soft and steady. The world was still spinning. Even after betrayal, even after cancer, even after secrets buried under old floorboards. And for once, I didn't feel the need to fix everything. I just felt the need to keep walking. 2 days later, Dean called. I told her, he said. I braced myself. How'd she take it? She didn't say much. Packed a bag, took the kids to her sister's. Said she needed time to think. I sat down, heart sinking. Do you think she's coming back? He was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I'm sorry, son. I'm not, he said, voice steady. I want a life built on truth, not borrowed time. For the first time, I believed him. That weekend, we held a small gathering in May's house. Just a few neighbors, some casseroles, and a lot of hugs. The whole town had heard about her diagnosis by then. Millstone was like that. Nothing stayed secret for long. But no one whispered. No one pitted her. They showed up with warmth, strength, and soup. Lots of soup. May stood in the middle of it all, pale but glowing, like someone discovering her own power. She pulled me aside at one point. I've been thinking, she said. If treatment goes well, I want to open that old bakery on Main Street. I blinked. The one that's been boarded up since 2009? She nodded. It has a big kitchen, big enough for baking and for people. For what people? For the ones who need a warm place and a kind word. She smiled. For people like you. Like me. Like Dean. I looked at her like she was a vision. Maybe she was. You're amazing, I said. She shrugged. No, just finally ready to live. The call came on a Tuesday morning. May and I were sitting on the porch, sipping warm lemon water while the sun tried its best to cut through the frosty air. Her hand trembled just slightly as she pressed the phone to her ear. I watched her face carefully. Every flicker of her eyes, the corners of her mouth, the way her foot bounced against the porch rail. When she hung up, she didn't speak for a moment. Then, 6 months. Chemo, radiation, surgery, the whole 9 yards. I nodded slowly, reaching for her hand. We'll get through it, I said. She smiled softly. I believe that. But when I saw the printout she handed me, the estimate for treatment, follow-ups, and medication, my heart nearly sank. $138,000. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket cost was devastating. May shrugged. I got a little saved. Retirement from school, a bit from Tom's life insurance, but it won't cover half. I looked out over the yard, my jaw tight. She deserved better than this. We sat in silence until the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a man stood there, maybe in his 70s, with a lined face and tired eyes. He wore an old ranch coat and held a battered leather satchel in his hands. You Martin Hale? Yes. He stuck out a hand. Name's Roy Branson. I drove here from Emmett, Idaho. I shook his hand, confused. What can I do for you? He looked down, shifted his weight. I was in love with your wife, Helen. I blinked. Excuse me? He took off his hat, nodded toward the porch. Mind if we talk? May brought out 2 mugs of coffee and sat beside me on the swing. Roy sat across from us, nervously fiddling with the strap of his satchel. It was 1976, he began. I was 25, just back from overseas. Your wife, Helen, back then was a waitress in Boise at a place called Ruby's Diner. I was home for a cousin's wedding. Met her on a rainy afternoon. She brought me pie. We talked all afternoon. Next day, we drove to the lake. He paused, cleared his throat. She was the first woman who made me feel whole. We kept in touch for a few months. Letters, long-distance calls. Then she wrote me that she'd met someone, a man named Martin, that you were a good man, that she hoped I'd understand. He looked up at me. I did, but I never forgot her. I stared at him, unsure what to say. Why are you here, Mr. Branson? May asked gently. He opened his satchel. Because she left this with me, and she told me, if anything ever happened to her, I should bring it to you. He pulled out a small, wooden box, aged and worn. She gave me this in 1993. We crossed paths at a teacher's conference in Billings. Just briefly. She was older. Happy, she said, but she pressed this into my hands and said, "If I'm ever gone too soon, give this to Martin." I took the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a velvet pouch and a stack of letters. The pouch held a ring, a second wedding ring. Smaller, more delicate, engraved inside, asterisk for the life we never had. H. My heart squeezed. The letters were journal entries. Pages and pages of Helen's handwriting, dated from the late 1970s to early 2000s. Some were addressed to me, others to Roy. Most were just raw thoughts. May touched my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't. Roy stood. "I'll be at the motel off Route 3 for a few days. If you want to talk. If not, that's okay too." He left. May and I sat there in silence, the wind whispering through the pine trees. That night, I sat at the kitchen table reading every word. Helen wrote about everything. Raising Dean, the guilt over her choices, her fears about dying too young. But the most heartbreaking part was this. Asterisk. I loved 2 men in my life, but only one built a life with me. Only one raised my son. Only one stayed when it got hard. Martin, if you ever read this, please know I chose you. Every day, even when the ghosts came knocking, I chose you. I closed the journal, tears burning in my eyes. Even in betrayal, she loved me. Even when her heart was split in two, she stayed. And now, May needed me to do the same. The next morning, I called Roy. We met at the diner. 2 old men, bound by the same woman. We didn't speak much, just shook hands. I gave him the ring back. "She loved you too," I said. He nodded. "But she belonged to you." We parted as 2 men who understood grief. Not as rivals, but as survivors. Later that day, I drove to the bank and made arrangements. I took a portion of my savings, refinanced a piece of land I'd been holding, and cut a check for May. She refused at first. I insisted. "This isn't charity. This is family." She cried, then held me like I was the only solid thing in the world. May started chemo on a Monday. The infusion room at St. Francis was painted in soft greens and blues, clearly designed to make people forget they were being filled with poison in the name of hope. Recliners lined the walls like lonely thrones. For poles stood like steel skeletons beside each patient. She wore a hat, wool, purple, and too big. She knitted it herself the night before, her fingers trembling with every stitch. I sat beside her, reading an old Louis L'Amour novel, but I barely turned a page. My eyes kept drifting to the tube in her arm, to the slow drip, drip, drip of the 4 bag, to the way her breath caught when the cold hit her veins. "I feel like I swallowed winter," she whispered, teeth chattering. I held her hand. For 5 hours we sat like that. She didn't cry. Neither did I, but we both wanted to. The days that followed were worse. Nausea, exhaustion, shaking, bone pain. May, the woman who once took charge of the PDA and painted her own house at 63, now barely made it from bed to bathroom without help. I moved into the guest room, cooked every meal, managed her meds, wiped her face when she couldn't keep anything down. And still, she found a way to smile at me. "You know," she rasped one evening, "if you ever get tired of this, you'd make a decent nurse." I chuckled. "I think I prefer fixing tractors." "Too bad," she whispered. "You're stuck with me, Florence Nightingale." A week later, I came home from the pharmacy to find Dean on my porch. His face was pale, and his hands trembled around a half-drunk coffee cup. "It's Marla," he said. I set the bag down. "What happened?" "She filed for separation. Wants full custody." My stomach dropped. She said she can't trust me anymore. But the DNA stuff, the move, everything, she doesn't know who I am. He laughed bitterly. "Truth is, neither do I." I sat down beside him. "This isn't the end, son." He looked at me, broken. "It sure feels like it." I thought of Helen, of Roy, of all the things we carry for love. "Maybe it's just the beginning," I said, "but you're gonna have to fight for it." That night, as snow blanketed the world again, I tucked May in with a fresh quilt and a cool cloth on her head. She looked at me through heavy lids. "Martin," she murmured, "you okay?" "I should be asking you that." "No," she whispered, "because you give and give. And sometimes I wonder who gives to you." I sat beside her. "You do," I said. "Every time you fight." The second round of chemo hit May harder than the first. By the end of the third day, she could barely hold down water. Her skin turned the color of ash, her lips cracked and bled, and her voice grew so faint I had to lean close just to hear her say, "I'm okay." She wasn't okay. That night, I found her collapsed in the bathroom, her breath ragged, pulse weak. I called 911, and the paramedics came fast, but it felt like forever. I rode with her in the ambulance, holding her hand, whispering prayers I didn't believe in until I believed in them again. At St. Francis, they rushed her into the ER. Her fever had spiked to 104.7. Her blood pressure was dangerously low. They hooked her up to IVs, oxygen, machines that beeped and blinked in frantic rhythms. I sat outside the curtain, my head in my hands, listening to nurses rush past. She could die. That thought wrapped around me like a steel chain. I just started living again. I wasn't ready to lose her. She stabilized after 12 hours. The doctors called it neutropenic sepsis, a dangerous side effect when chemo wipes out your immune system. They moved her to ICU. I never left. Dean brought me clean clothes, coffee, and updates on the kids. I barely heard them. My world had shrunk to the beeping of May's heart monitor and the rise and fall of her chest. When she opened her eyes 2 days later, I cried. "You again?" she whispered. "Always me." She reached for my hand. "Still think you prefer fixing tractors?" I laughed through tears. Tractors don't mean this much to me. They kept her for a week. Then another. The whole town rallied around her. Eleanor and Paul brought hot meals. Pastor Rick came to pray, though May made him promise not to get too preachy. Even Roy stopped by, bringing her a quilt his late wife had stitched before her own battle with cancer. May smiled more in those hospital days than I'd ever seen. Even weak, she was luminous. "I don't want this to be the end of my story," she told me one night. "It's not. Then let's write the rest of it together." On Christmas Eve, May came home. Dean strung lights across her porch. Ellie hung handmade ornaments on her tiny tree. I cooked for 20 people and only burned the biscuits. It snowed the whole day. A soft, quiet snow. The kind that made the world look clean, pure, full of second chances. That night, just before midnight, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find the mail carrier, bundled in a red parka, holding a snow-dusted envelope. "Sorry, Mr. Hale," she said. "This got stuck in the holiday bin. Looks important." It was addressed in a familiar script. From Helen, dated 2 weeks before her death. I stared at it, hands trembling. I took it inside and sat at the kitchen table. May stood in the doorway, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "What is it?" she asked. "A letter. From her." She nodded. "Do you want to be alone?" "No, I want you here." I opened the envelope. "Martin, if you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead without you. I'm sorry for that. I always thought you'd go first. You were always the reckless one, always climbing ladders without checking the rungs. I know you've probably found the box by now, and the letters, and the truth I never had the courage to say out loud. But there's one more thing I need you to know. Dean is your son. After I wrote that journal, I finally took the test. It sat in a drawer for months. I was too scared to open the result, but eventually I did. He's yours, Martin. All the way. I let fear cloud too many years. Don't let it do the same to you. Love May. Love those grandbabies. Let them see what real love looks like. Merry Christmas, my love. Always. Helen. I stared at the letter, tears streaming down my cheeks. May rubbed my back. She loved you so much, she whispered. And I loved her. The truth didn't change that, but the clarity that gave me peace. Dean was my son. Every laugh, every argument, every memory mine. I gave him the letter on Christmas morning. He cried, hugged me like a boy again. I never doubted it, he said, but it still means the world. Later that day, Marla returned with the kids. She stood awkwardly at the front door, her eyes red. I got your letter, she said. Dean nodded. I meant every word. I'm not ready to come back, she said, but I want us to try. For the kids. For us. He took her hand. I'll wait as long as it takes. She smiled. Just don't burn the house down with your cooking. That night, we gathered around May's table. The house smelled of cinnamon and roast beef. Laughter spilled into every corner. Ellie sat on May's lap, reading from a book. Dean and Marla washed dishes side by side, and I sat back, watching them, my heart full. This was my family, born not just from blood, but from choices, forgiveness, endurance. After thousands of miles, a lifetime of storms, and more heartbreak than I thought I could survive, I was home. As the clock struck midnight, May leaned over and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Martin." I kissed her forehead. "Merry Christmas, my love."